Hello everyone, Nathan here, and with the crazy Christmas period of 2017 over, and games both good and bad gone, we are now well and truly in the January lull. And while I'd love to be here talking about some brilliant new game that's just come out, there really isn't that much to choose from at the moment. So instead today, I thought I'd take a look forward into 2018 and talk about some of the biggest games coming up, and maybe a few other things that I think we might see this year. And if you want to skip to any particular game or topic, you'll find the timestamps in the description. So let's get started with possibly the most hyped game coming this year in Red Dead Redemption 2. It's fair to say that the first game in the series is looked back on as one of the most loved of the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, and fans have been clamouring for another installment for years. So what can we expect to see from Red Dead 2? Well, it's pretty obvious that Rockstar Games has a reputation for building incredible living open worlds, and honestly I'm very much expecting to see about as close to a cowboy GTA as Rockstar can get away with. Now, from certain angles that sounds great. I'm expecting a highly entertaining story with plenty of side activities to keep me occupied when I just want to mess about, and I think we can also expect a pretty heavy emphasis to be put on some form of online mode for this one. Take-Two have even said that they're looking to put recurrent consumer spending opportunities in all of its games going forward, and for anyone who wants that in plain English, that means microtransactions. Now, of course there are ways to put microtransactions in games without an online mode, but given the massive success of the GTA Online model, which has reportedly generated at least $500 million in revenue, why would they change that strategy? Personally, that doesn't sound like a particularly good thing to me, and it's a big part of why GTA Online doesn't really interest me. I don't want to keep having to spend money just to keep up with all the other players. That's my opinion though, and the amount of money that GTA Online makes clearly puts me in some kind of minority. And I'm sure there are thousands upon thousands of people who love the idea of a Red Dead Online. As for what we can glean from the trailers that have been released, we can see this one will be a prequel to the original, and the apparent player character Arthur Morgan is going to be at best an anti-hero and at worst a really nasty piece of work, which can definitely make for some exciting gameplay, since it's always fun to be just that little bit evil. Of course the game is called Red Dead Redemption though, and I expect we'll see some kind of character turnaround during the story of the game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is chalked up for spring this year for Xbox One and PS4. Next up is the game that has most piqued my interest in the list of upcoming releases, and it's Kingdom Come Deliverance. This medieval style RPG seems to take its cue from games like The Witcher and to a certain extent Skyrim, and then take out all of the fantasy elements for a far more realistic experience. And while I think that the removal of dragons, elves, griffins and whatever other fantasy creatures you can think of might put some people off, personally I think it sounds like a very interesting prospect. I do have a couple of reservations though. Firstly, the trailer seems to suggest the game is exclusively first person, and first person melee combat has rarely been done well. Even in Skyrim, which is one of my favourite games, the sword combat was pretty damn woeful, and 99% of battles that I went into using a sword instead of magic or projectiles just ended up with me hammering the attack button until the enemy was dead. Fortunately, it doesn't look like that's what they're doing though. It looks like they're going with something more similar to a For Honor combat system, and that certainly isn't up my street either, since I feel that that would be too slow and clumsy for a game that isn't as contained as For Honor is. A match of For Honor takes place in a small map over the course of a few minutes. An open world RPG takes place in a huge map over the course of hundreds of hours. And that actually brings me on to my second concern, which is that they seem to want to emphasise the size of the world that they've created. And that's all well and good having a huge world, but if there's nothing in it, what's the point? Games like The Witcher 3 are so great not because of the size of the world, but because around every corner of it there's a new quest to complete and more content to keep you entertained. And while I'm not saying that Kingdom Come Deliverance won't have that same sort of feeling, it's always a worry with these big open world RPGs. With all that being said though, I'm still definitely intrigued by Kingdom Come Deliverance, and with the promise that Warhorse Studios are trying to maximise immersion with this one, I hope they can make it as realistic as they want, but not at the expense of fun. Kingdom Come Deliverance isn't too far away now, with a confirmed release date of February 13th, 2018 for PC, Xbox One and PS4. Moving on, we come to Far Cry 5, and oh, where to start with this one? Honestly, to me, having watched a fairly significant amount of gameplay because a lot of YouTubers got hands-on early with this, what Far Cry 5 appears to be to me is Far Cry 4 with a different setting. It looks like you'll have the usual massive arsenal of weapons from assault rifles to explosives, and of course, a compound bow for some reason. And the missions seem to be the standard: liberate this place, go here and kill 5 of these, catch the convoy, and so on and so on. Now, as you'd expect from the franchise, this game graphically looks superb, and I'm sure there'll be some people out there who are itching for another Far Cry game. I just personally can't see what this game is going to do better than Far Cry 4 or even Far Cry 3. Now, I mentioned the setting a little while ago, so let's talk some more about that, because an interesting setting can bring an otherwise average game to life. So, Far Cry 5 is set in the USA, taking a bit of a detour from the previous game's more exotic locations. The idea is that you have to take on a dangerous and heavily armed cult that is set up in Montana, and immediately when you look at the gameplay, you just go, wait, where the hell are the police in all of this? Even the army, given some of the crazy stuff that's going on, and yes, you are a deputy with the sheriff's department, but there's no way you'd be sent in on your own for this. There's no way other organisations wouldn't know about it and do something. It just hasn't drawn me in. Looking back at the other games, Far Cry 3 had you abducted by pirates on a Pacific island, Far Cry 4 was set in a nation torn apart by civil war, Far Cry Primal saw you transported back through time to the Stone Age, and as many problems as those games had, they all had a setting that made me want to play. Far Cry 5 doesn't. Of course though, I do still intend to play this game, and with the game already having been delayed, it suggests that Ubisoft are at least making sure this one is polished before launch, so I hope I'm wrong and I hope it ends up being great. Far Cry 5 is releasing on March 27th for PS4, Xbox One and PC. I hope you'll indulge me a little bit here because there's not really much information on this one yet, but I was really desperate to talk briefly about The Wolf Among Us Season 2, because I absolutely loved Season 1, and I'm not usually a massive Telltale fan. With most Telltale games, I feel like a bit of a passenger to the action, but the story from Season 1 was so good that I really didn't care. The blend of fairy tale characters and a dirty, gritty view on their lives trying to blend into the real world, I feel was superbly executed the first time round, and while we don't have much information on Season 2 yet, I have every faith it'll be everything the fans have been waiting 3 years for. We're getting a standalone story here, not directly related to the first, and as long as there's more big bad wolf in it, I'm a happy man. The Wolf Among Us Season 2 is coming at some stage this year. Right, on from one game that one people have been waiting a long time for to another in the form of The Last of Us 2. The original was one of the best games of 2013 and spawned a 2014 remaster for the PS4. And while the gameplay definitely offered a real sense of tension at times and some decent combat mechanics, I think the reason that I and so many others enjoyed playing this was the relationship between Joel and Ellie and the way those two characters developed through the game. So what do we know about the sequel? Well, the main character has switched from being Joel in the original to now being Ellie, a change which I think a lot of people really wanted to see. The game also takes place 5 years after the original, and Ellie is now grown up and seemingly quite aggressive, even going as far as saying in the trailer,
"I'm gonna find, and I'm gonna kill every last one of them."
That's some way from the often scared girl that we saw in the original, and it'll be interesting to see how well Naughty Dog have developed her character and what's caused such a change. Another interesting development hinted at in the trailers is that there appears to be another human threat in this game, and you'll have to worry about the living as well as the infected. This was also present in the first game, and in my opinion made for one of the best parts of the story, so I'm glad to see this idea return. Naughty Dog very rarely makes a misstep, and I think The Last of Us 2 will be a quality game. Honestly, my only problem here is that it's a PS4 exclusive, meaning a decent number of potential players will miss out on this one. The Last of Us 2 has no solid release date yet and could easily be 2019, but don't lose hope just yet because there is a chance it will be out late this year. Now, what kind of predictions video would this be without gaming's biggest yearly franchise? Yep, it's Call of Duty time. Now, we have no details here on what to expect, except that there definitely will be a COD game this year. So this is pretty much all going to be me trying to figure out what the hell Activision would do next with this series. So we finally got back to boots on the ground with COD World War II in 2017, after years of double jumps and wall running, and really it's what the community at large had been asking for a long time, so it was no real surprise. Now, I don't personally think they'd want to go back to the craziness of Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3 or Infinite Warfare just yet, and I'd predict another year of more of the old school style of COD game. The one thing we can predict with a decent degree of certainty is that the devs will be Treyarch, who've previously worked on the Black Ops series, World at War, and more interestingly from my point of view, Modern Warfare 3. For me, I'm thinking that Modern Warfare 4 would be the obvious place to go, or at least another modern setting. It's different enough from the World War setting that we've just visited, and it's still boots on the ground. Alongside that, the clear desire for a modern setting that we saw with Modern Warfare Remastered might signal to Activision that if they get it right, Modern Warfare 4 could be a hit. Whatever we end up getting, and we'll be getting something, of course we will, it's COD. You can expect to see it available in early November on PC, PS4 and Xbox One. And if you're not a shooter fan, then I'm sorry, but you really can't talk about Call of Duty without mentioning Battlefield, especially as with EA cycling Battlefield and Battlefront on alternate years, this is a Battlefield year. Now, the major leak here is finally another game in the Bad Company series might be coming after 8 years away. This makes a lot of sense as fans of the series have been asking for this for years, and if DICE can capture the massive destructibility and fun that was Battlefield Bad Company 2, it'll be an easy home run. It also doesn't compete in exactly the same market as Battlefront 2, as it's not a sci-fi setting, and although as far as I'm concerned Battlefront 2 is now dead, when EA was planning its release schedule, they probably would have wanted to avoid a high level of cannibalization. News reports have questioned those leaks saying a Bad Company game though, and raised prospects for a World War II setting, but for me that'll be too similar to Battlefield 1, which, let's face it, was World War II with a World War I skin. And it also looked like copying Call of Duty since that's where they just went, so I'm more inclined to go with the Bad Company theory. EA of course though can find a way to mess up even the best of ideas, usually through aggressive monetization, and while I don't think it's going to be a huge issue for the Battlefield series, there is another game later in this video that I think will suffer. My main concern here is that there won't be enough depth of content. Looking back at Battlefield 4, we had 72 primary weapons in the base game, and in a shooter, weapons are a huge part of the content. In Battlefield 1 though, we had just 20, and that's excluding all the variations of the same weapon. It just feels like EA is happy giving us less and less content and hoping no one will notice, and I think that's why a lot of people got bored with Battlefield 1. Of course, they still ask full price. Oh, and premium as well for Battlefield 1, there was premium for that. I do think though that premium and map packs are dead, and those days of Battlefield having paid maps coming out every few months are gone. That is definitely a good thing, which will mean keeping the community together with free maps for everyone. Of course though, EA will want to monetize in another way, and I'm expecting more emphasis to be put on the battle packs, which, let's face it, are loot boxes. I do think though that they'll be purely cosmetic, at least they will if EA has learned anything of PR or marketing. The next installment in the Battlefield franchise will almost definitely be available in late 2018 for PC, PS4 and Xbox One. Next, we're on to Sea of Thieves, a multiplayer pirate game coming out of Rare and published by Microsoft. This one seems to be a game all about interactions with other players, be they helpful or hostile. This doesn't seem to be being pitched in any way as a game that you'll want to play on your own. Instead, you'll want to gather up a group of friends to explore, battle and search for hidden treasure with. Sure, they say you can play Sea of Thieves on your own, but it seems like the experience will be significantly cut down. Sea of Thieves to me is looking like a game that's going to give players a world and just say go, find your own fun. Sure, there are going to be missions or what they're calling voyages to complete, and there'll be goals to achieve, but having watched some of the dev gameplay available on the official Sea of Thieves channel, it's going to be more about finding your own way of doing that. Now, I'm sure the idea of massive pirate battles with your friends sounds very enticing to a lot of people, and a game that builds on the ideas of others like Guns of Icarus, where every crew member has an individual role, will be right up some people's alley. My main concern with this one is longevity. Sure, it'll have thousands upon thousands of players at launch, but will there be enough there to keep players coming back? Once your game is based largely on multiplayer features, this becomes a big issue. On Xbox One, I don't foresee too many problems. As for PC though, the fact that Sea of Thieves appears to be a Windows Store release rather than Steam might be a problem. Not every PC gamer is using Windows 10, and not even all of them visit the Windows Store. In the end, I'm expecting Sea of Thieves to be a game that some people will absolutely love and will play for hundreds of hours, while other people, probably including me, will give it 10 to 20 hours before moving on. Sea of Thieves will be available on the 20th of March on PC, Windows Store, and Xbox One. On now to A Way Out, an EA published game by Hazelight Studios and directed by Joseph Fares, who also worked on Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, and while A Way Out looks absolutely nothing like that stylistically or in terms of the story, we can expect to see a lot of the teamwork in that game transfer over, as this one is only playable in split-screen co-op, with each player taking control of one of the two playable characters, Vincent and Leo. Now you can do the split screen online, but this is a really interesting idea. I don't think I've ever seen another video game that requires a second player to play split screen with, and I'm sure if I'm wrong I'll be very quickly corrected in the comments. Sure, there are plenty of games that have co-op modes or are heavily pushed to be co-op, and some of them have sold very well, but whether a game that relies on split screen will be successful is still in the balance in my mind. A lot of it will come down to how well it's executed, and having seen portions of the gameplay, it looks pretty damn good so far. There appears to be multiple options on how to approach problems, where both characters will have to play their own part, and the story aspect of the game revolving initially around a jailbreak and then moving on to the outside world definitely looks compelling. For me, this is looking like something that I can't wait to play. I love story-driven games that let you choose how to tackle problems, and if I can share that experience with a friend, discussing how to approach tasks and then arguing when it all inevitably goes wrong, then all the better. A Way Out is coming on March 23rd for Xbox One, PS4 and PC. On now to Nintendo, and I've chosen to bundle this together all into one, mainly as there's one game I want to talk about in particular, but first I also want to briefly mention the Nintendo Direct Mini we just had. The Nintendo Switch will be seeing quite a few ports coming to the system in 2018, and none more interesting than Dark Souls Remastered. Now this is also coming to other platforms, but the idea of playing Dark Souls on the go is one that sounds incredible to a lot of series fans, and unless the port is somehow completely messed up with terrible frame rates and badly optimised, I can only see this being a huge success. As for the game I really did want to talk about though, well, the one that really excites me is the prospect of a main console Pokemon game, which looks set to launch in 2018. The rumours also seem to suggest a move away from the turn-based battle system that the series has used since the days of Pokemon Blue and Red that I remember playing as a kid. Instead, we could see more of a real-time system, looking more like the fighting game Pokken Tournament. If done well, this could be a great development for the series, modernising and moving to something more interactive and dynamic, but it's still sure to anger some fans who love the game the way it is. Now, the Switch had an incredible first year in terms of sales and reception, and it'll be hard to maintain that momentum, and while I personally don't expect it to continue at such a pace, Nintendo have certainly proved me wrong in the past. Just a couple more subjects I want to mention before we finish, and the Elder Scrolls is always one that's on my mind. As I said earlier in the video, I loved Skyrim when it came out, but that was all the way back in 2011, back in my first year of university. For me at least, that's a lifetime ago, and the Elder Scrolls Online and what feels like hundreds and hundreds of re-releases have done nothing to fill that Skyrim-shaped hole. So while I'm not expecting a release this year, I really am hoping to finally hear some actual confirmation that another game in the Elder Scrolls series is coming, and not that Bethesda are doing Skyrim remastered. So I'm going to stick my neck out here, probably more in hope than expectation, and say that I predict we'll hear official confirmation and see a trailer for the Elder Scrolls 6 this year. Finally, I want to talk about Anthem, and I've saved this one for last because I also want to talk about loot boxes and monetization. And I feel like the discussion about the game and these practices goes hand in hand at the moment. Anthem is a third-person shooter RPG style game that's been developed with a shared world design, like games like Destiny use, where players share the same space but aren't necessarily doing the same missions. And it's this, along with the fully customizable exosuits, that worries me. It all seems designed for microtransactions to play a huge role. The fact that other real players can see you lends perfectly to cosmetic loot, and this full customizability suggests upgrades. I mean, just look at what Destiny's done this year and all the controversy surrounding that game. Hell, it's already been reported that loot boxes for Anthem are an ongoing discussion, and you just know that if EA had got away with what they tried to do to Battlefront 2, it wouldn't even be that. It'd be happening. End of discussion. I honestly think they're waiting to see if public anger dies down enough for them to throw loot boxes in. Now, you can have your own opinion on loot boxes and microtransactions, but here's what I think. I understand companies wanting to make money beyond the initial sale, and while I'm not a fan of that practice, I will accept a game that sells cosmetic DLC direct to the player, not through a random box of goodies, just you see what you want and you buy it, and certainly not something that affects in-game stats in a multiplayer game. Now, do I think Anthem will go beyond that? Of course it will. What I just pitched wouldn't make nearly enough money, and I think other games now see what customers will accept without kicking up too much of a fuss, and that's cosmetic only loot boxes. And unless this is reclassified as the gambling that it undoubtedly is, I don't see any end to these sort of practices in 2018, and right now I'm not the least bit excited for Anthem. In fact, I'm worried for it, and that's a shame because I've loved previous BioWare games. Either way, and I really do hope that my fears are put aside for this one, it'll be out late this year. Right, so that's about it for today. Obviously there's a lot that I just couldn't include on this list, and a lot we don't know about yet. I'm hoping to see some great surprises, and as always a lot of fantastic indies. I also hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I'd be very appreciative of a like down below. Let me know what games you're looking forward to and your predictions down in the comments, and subscribe for more like this if you haven't already. Anyway, thanks for watching, I've been Nathan, and I'll see you next time.